So integral eye movement therapy started off as just an experimentation that I was doing. I started teaching things that I was doing to small groups. And what started off as a 1 hour to 2 hour presentation then became a 4 hour presentation. And I was quite surprised that this was a very popular thing. Word got round, more people wanted to know what I was doing. Then it became a 1 day presentation, and then people were going, what, is there more to this? And I went, yes, there's lots more. So what we ended up with is a formalized 2-day training in IEMT, Integral Eye Movement Therapy. Now, I've got to tell you, I never intended it to become what it's become. It was just an experimentation as to what could be achieved in creating rapid neurological, psychological, and emotional change. Before I knew it, we had a model. Something emerged from this that was quite dramatic. Let me explain. In IEMT, we use eye movements in a very specific way to create very specific change in memory. Now, there's existing eye movement processes that have been around for a lot longer than I have, and a lot longer than IEMT has, that are equally as effective for creating change in memory. Essentially, it looks like this. Think about something bad, something negative in your life, something that happened to you or something you were party to, but essentially something from the past that feels bad in some way. Hold the memory in your mind and move your eyes. And if you move your eyes out to the peripheries, all the way out in different ways, for a lot of people, a lot of the time, the memory changes. And it changes in a very, very specific way. This was the feature that I was already aware of. What I wanted to do was to discover, how does it change? What are the specific qualities that make it different? And then what can we do with that? Now, we know that eye movements create significant change in memory. So I thought, okay, what can we do with that to apply it to the area of emotional health, identity, and what I regard as chronicity? This is people who stay stuck inside a problem in the face of all their therapeutic help that they're getting. What started to emerge was a number of very interesting features. One is that there are 5 patterns of chronicity. There's others, what I regard as sub-patterns. But there are 5 things that people with long-term psychological and emotional difficulties all seem to have in common. And what I wanted to then look at was, what can we do about those 5 patterns? Because if we interfere with those 5 patterns and change them, do people recover? Well, my friends, I can tell you, yes, they do. Well, most of the people, most of the time. This doesn't work for everybody. So if holding a memory in your mind and moving your eyes creates change in the memory, what happens if we get you to think about the memory of an emotion? So the first time that you can remember feeling the way that you felt, assuming it's a problem feeling. And instead of thinking about memory and just changing memories, we start changing emotional imprints. You see, in order to have a phobia of something, you've had to learn to feel the way that you feel about the thing that you feel. In order to have any emotion, for example, you feel bad about Monday mornings and going to work, well, that kinesthetic, that emotional bit, you've had to learn to do that. And somewhere in the deep, dark recesses of your mind or your brain, that information is stored. So I put together a very simple algorithm by which we can access the imprints of how people learned to feel the way that they feel and then create change there. Now, the results from this workshop, this started off as a 1 hour workshop, then it became a 2 hour workshop, then it became 4 hours, and it was a whole day, and it became incredibly popular. I never intended it to be so. I just thought, let's experiment, and more people wanted to know about what I was doing. With repeated workshops and trainings, something very obvious started to emerge, and that is the area of identity. In that, a lot of people want to change how they feel about stuff, and a lot of people want to change how they feel about themselves, which isn't quite the same. How I feel about something in the past is one thing, how I feel about myself is something else, but then there's also who I am. And I can dislike how I feel about myself, but I can also dislike who I am. Now, around about this time, I met with a guy called David Grove, a very talented, very creative psychotherapist. He's since died, unfortunately. And he showed me a few little details around identity, which I then incorporated into the workshop. Now, what emerged from this is a two-stage process. On day one of the workshop, we work primarily with emotions. So it's imprinting of emotions. And day two is imprints of identity. So day one, how did you learn to feel the way that you feel? And then what we can do about that. And day two is, how did you learn to be who you are? And then what can we do about that? You see, you don't own your identity as much as you'd like to. There's only so many things you own. The rest of your identity is owned by everybody else. Because people may not know who you are, but they treat you in a certain way. You get assigned all these aspects of who you are. Your religion, your race, your social class, the skin color, just so many different things are all assigned to you. And then culture creates an identity around those things. But then there are stuff that you can change, how you feel about those things and how you view yourself to be. So that is basically, in a nutshell, what IEMT is. It's using eye movements to create very specific neurological, emotional, and identity change. The change tends to happen very, very quickly. It's a very fast way of working. It is similar in terms of the delivery of it to other existing eye movements. Eye movement processes, things like EMDR, eye movement integration. But the structure of what we do and the application thereof is vastly different. So there's a lot of people who are EMDR trainers or are practitioners of EMDR who have come along and trained in IEMT, which is integral eye movement therapy. 100% of them, there hasn't been anyone so far that's disagreed with this, has said IEMT is vastly different to EMDR, both in what we do with it and the application in terms of what clients then do with it. So this, if you've done eye movement work before and it's not IEMT, I am certain, if I guarantee, this material is very different. Okay, now in terms of the success rate, what I'm very, very keen to point out to people, in fact, I'm keen to point out to everybody, IEMT is not the grand unified theory of therapy. It will not cure all people of all things. So don't even think that. Some people want to come along to learn that one technique that they can use on everybody to both become this famous therapist, fabulously wealthy, and have the most amazing success results ever. It isn't that. It is a very effective technique and it does work extremely well when it does work. But it really only works for very specific things. My criteria for using IEMT in my clinical work myself is this is used when life has messed up the person. So a person goes through life and things happen to them and they are affected by the things that happen to them. This is remedial change work. This isn't generative change work, which is when people are messing up their life. So the problems are a result of things they are doing. That's when I use the more metaphor orientated work. So this is more for remedial work when life has messed up the person. So it's very good for things like trauma, through people who've had difficulty throughout relationships or in workplaces or through childhood, that kind of stuff. Now, in terms of participation in the workshops, the workshop is highly experiential. It's divided up into 9 primary sections, and each section has a bit of a knowledge lecture attached to it, and then a group of exercises based around it. The exercises are designed in a very specific way, and I think this makes the IEMT training quite unique. Rather than me tell the participants what happens, the exercises are designed so they can find out for themselves what happens. And each exercise leads onto the next exercise. Generally, the workshop is structured in an interesting way. Day one is quite intense. It's dealing with all the emotional stuff. It's dealing with a lot of stuff that's personal to individuals in the room. So there's a lot of personal discovery, a lot of personal changes get made. There's a few tears get shed and an awful lot of laughter as well. but it's very emotional and it gets a little bit intense. People love that kind of stuff. It feels real. There's none of this, let's all sit around and drink tea and talk about how we feel. No, 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 no. This is direct intervention-based training work. Day 2, however, is entirely different. Because day 2 is structured around identity, there is no real set thing for what people have to do. Again, the exercises are designed that the individual discovers these things for themselves. And if you're working in a group of 2 or 3 people, it's fairly certain that the other 2 or 3 people in the group, or the other 1 or 2 people in the group, are discovering different things to yourself. So at the end of each of the sessions, we do a roundup and an exchange of what happened and what people notice. Typically, day 2 is notable for the sound of laughter in the room, especially when we get into the physiological and identity exercises, which is on the second day in the afternoon. So there's a lot of fun, and people leave on a bit of a high. What is very noticeable is that people are going away with the skill set that I'm expecting people to have. And the vast majority of people who then go and apply this to other people or to themselves or friends and family are getting very, very good results and report back some of the experiences they have. Overall, this is a highly successful experience for people to come along to. And it's something that is quite unique. So many people who've got NLP backgrounds, they've got hypnotherapy backgrounds, they've got psychotherapy, psychiatry, we've got a lot of medical people that have done the training. All of them have reported consistently that this training is different to everything they've done before. And we also have a number of people, actually quite a lot of people, who have said that the content of IEMT, what is taught in 2 days, is superior to many courses they have done previously that gets covered in a week or 10 days, whatever it is. I say that and it sounds like a boast, but I can't help it. That's what people report back. So now the question about research in IEMT. This is happening at this very time. We've got 2 key studies happening at the moment. These are pilot studies to demonstrate the efficacy of IEMT. If we get a positive result, the idea is we write it all up, send it off, and then we get some university research being carried out. The 2 projects that we have at the moment, we're looking at psoriasis. A couple of people have reported back fantastic results in working with psoriasis patients that have been referred to them by GPs or various people around them. And they're using basically the IEMT material on psoriasis as a symptom. That's a skin problem. We weren't quite expecting the results to be as good as they have become. So one of the studies is that we're getting through 25 to 30 psoriasis patients. We've got a very specific IEMT algorithm that we are working with them. Once the results are all in, that will be collated and written up. We're hoping it's going to be positive. It may not be, of course. I'm a realist with this. Regardless, we're going to be writing up the results of this and publishing it. If it is positive, then we will be looking for funding and further research. The other study, which is a lot more specific, is on post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, only a specific number of people are actually doing this study. We're recruiting people from all over the place. Now, we know, I'm 100% certain that the efficacy study for using IEMT with post-traumatic stress will be overwhelmingly positive because of the experience I've got clinically in working with this. Time and time again, the results are in. The results are just basically saying this is a fantastic way of working with people. So the pilot study here again is to put it into controlled conditions where it then gets written up, it then gets published. Assuming it's positive, this one will be, I know. We then get funding for it to put in a proper double-blind correct study. So those are the 2 things at the moment. We're also looking at very simple things for like proving IEMT works for things like phobias. I also want to begin at some point in the very near future looking at kinesthetic change. So those kind of emotions that you don't have a clinical diagnostic category for, those quality of life issues that might be very specific to individuals that they simply are unable to explain to people because they just feel rubbish. They just don't feel good in a very specific way to them. These are things that are outside of the typical world of psychological emotional research. So again, IEMT lends itself extremely well to those kind of problems. So that's one of the other areas I want to actually explore and to put in the proofs there. Once that's done, see, we're not over yet. Once that's done, and we've got the proofs in that the efficacy of IEMT is there and it works, we will then be looking at doing some research on the presupposition of IEMT. The presupposition is this: people maintain problems in the face of all help because they have 5 patterns of chronicity, and that when we deal with those 5 patterns and they're removed, the problem goes away spontaneously. It might take time, but it will go away. So what we're going to do is essentially look at interviewing people with chronic problems and filtering for those patterns of chronicity. Again, it's just simply to prove that those things exist. Therefore, we can then test the hypothesis of removing those things. Does it make people better? Oh, my journey so far. So what have I been doing? To cut a very long story short, I was a strange child with very unusual interests. In order to seek sanctuary in my very big, oversized, scary school that I went to, I used to hide in the library. And fortunately, they had lots of weird books, things like Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. Actually, that was the book that started everything. I discovered there's a mysterious world out there, so I started looking for things. I went to school, I didn't like it very much. Went to college, didn't like it very much. I went to university, didn't like it very much. Qualified as a nurse, then I worked as a nurse from 1992 when I qualified to around about 2000. So 8 years working clinically in hospitals. Primarily, I did cardiology, cardiac surgery, accidents and emergency, and neurology and neurosurgery. I was a bit of a troublemaker when I worked in the hospitals. This isn't what a nurse is supposed to look like, and this is not how a nurse is supposed to speak. It's a very different culture in hospitals. Anyone that's worked in those environments will know what I'm talking about. Very hierarchical, terribly formal, and you have to be submissive to the hierarchies. Not for me, definitely not my style. In 1994, whilst I was still working in accidents and emergency, I went off and I did a training course in Milton Erickson, so Ericksonian hypnotherapy. I had no idea who Milton Erickson was, never heard of him. When it was Erickson, I thought it was Erik Erikson, the psychologist. And I did a 1 year's training, and I'd never heard of NLP, I'd never heard of Milton Erickson. I did the course, and to my surprise, I was really good at it. I was a very good, very effective hypnotist. And it really surprised me because I didn't really enjoy my job all that much. And what I was discovering was that my self-esteem was coming down, down, down. And I was beginning to think, am I one of those guys that's just not very good at stuff? And then I discovered something I was very good at. It just came naturally to me. Now, I carried on working as a nurse because I needed the income. I also was running the Southampton Experimental Hypnosis Group. I was introduced to NLP at that time. I did the training in that in 1998, and then onwards from there. I finished working clinically around about 2000. I then went into occupational health. Basically, I doubled my income, halved my hours, and did a very easy job, which enabled me then to write the book, The Rainbow Machine, and start writing all sorts of different things and reading lots of books. Basically, I had a lot more free time as a result of changing my job. IEMT was one of the things I had developed, and more recently things like metaphors of movement, which is really my current study, which is looking at bypassing the conscious hemisphere of the brain and accessing directly the non-dominant hemisphere of the brain, the unconscious, using metaphorical processes. This is all linguistic based. So essentially, at the moment, I'm looking at doing all the hypnosis stuff, but without any of the hypnosis stuff. It's a very, very different way of working. I've got a number of research projects on. I've done a lot of work with the university in relation to phantom limb pain. This is based around the Professor Ramachandran, who's a neurologist, who wrote a fantastic book called Phantoms in the Brain. He basically devised just an amazing method of curing pain that occurs in people that lost a limb. I took some of that work, I've experimented with it, done some modelling around the reactions clients have or patients have whilst being treated, and then the therapists or the doctor's reactions to the patient's reactions. Now, out of that, I put together a very simple model which has increased the efficacy of treatment. So essentially, I'm now taking people who failed to get help because the help didn't work with phantom limb pain, and I'm now creating extremely good results for those individuals. And this is now a process I'm teaching, and there's a website which will be in the comments section. What else have I done? During that time, I've got married. I've acquired lots of animals, lots of pets, lots of books. Still exploring all the mystical and alternative and magical world of different things. Still got a lot more to do yet. One of the things I'm lucky with, I'm blessed with a lifestyle now that means I can explore all the different things that I want to explore. I've got an independent income, which gives me a lot of free time to do the stuff that I want to do. One of those, of course, is traveling in India. Throughout all the time I was working as a nurse, I would regularly take long breaks, several months at a time. A couple of times I took a year off, which enabled me then to go off to India to study yoga and Tantra Buddhism, all things along those lines. Spend a lot of time around the various holy men and fakers and charlatans and some absolutely astounding individuals, which have made a huge impression on me and to a degree changed who I am. I think that's about it. If you want to know more, anyway, there's lots more on the website, and of course I'm going to be in India in 2015. So hopefully I will see you there.